"Dirty human, take off those clothes, you're hiding something naughty. Alien women." Its towers rose high into the sky, reaching towards the stars, while soft, golden lights shimmered around the vast gardens below. As Ethan stood at the entrance of the palace, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He was part of a diplomatic mission, one of the first human ambassadors to visit the Velvari people. The Velvari were an advanced and curious species, known for their technological wonders and strange customs. Ethan had been preparing for months, learning about their culture, history, and behavior. But there was one thing that had completely thrown him off: the Velvari's fascination with clothing. The humans on Earth were accustomed to covering themselves in clothes for many reasons: modesty, tradition, and protection from the elements. But to the Velvari, clothing seemed like an unnecessary and puzzling habit. Their species had long since abandoned the need for fabric coverings, and they found it odd that humans insisted on wearing clothes at all. It was this fascination that Ethan had been warned about, and he was nervous about how he would be received. As he entered the grand hall of the palace, the Velvari court greeted him with smiles, their soft purple skin glowing under the golden light. The room was filled with laughter and conversation in a language Ethan had learned, but only partially understood. The Queen, Queen Thara, a tall and regal figure with long silver hair and bright violet eyes, stood at the front of the room, welcoming him with open arms. Her presence was powerful yet warm, and her gaze held an intensity that made Ethan feel both honored and slightly intimidated. "Welcome, human ambassador Ethan," Queen Thara said, her voice smooth and melodic. "It is an honor to have you here in our home." Ethan bowed, trying to look confident despite the strange feeling bubbling in his stomach. "Thank you, Your Majesty. It's an honor to be here as well." As the Queen introduced him to the court, his eyes wandered around the room. The Velvari women were unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall and elegant, they moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. Their skin ranged from deep purple to soft lavender, and their long hair flowed behind them like shimmering silk. Their eyes sparkled with intelligence and curiosity. But what caught Ethan's attention more than anything else was the fact that none of them were wearing clothes. The women were completely bare, with only small, intricate jewelry adorning their bodies. This was something Ethan had been warned about, the Velvari's lack of clothing, but seeing it in person made him feel uneasy. It was so different from anything he had ever known. As he stood there, trying not to stare, he realized that everyone in the room was looking at him. They weren't just interested in his clothes, they were studying him. Ethan felt suddenly self-conscious, acutely aware of his simple human attire, a shirt and trousers, designed for comfort but certainly not designed for a grand palace like this one. "Human clothing," one of the women, Saren, said, stepping forward with a mischievous smile. She was strikingly beautiful, with long, jet-black hair and dark violet eyes that seemed to twinkle with amusement. "You wear so many layers. Do you feel hot in that?" Ethan blinked in surprise. "Well, it's not too warm where I come from." Saren raised an eyebrow, clearly puzzled. "But why hide your body? What is there to hide?" Ethan stammered slightly. It's just what we do on Earth. Clothing helps us protect ourselves, and it's part of our customs." Saren tilted her head, her smile widening. "But surely you don't need to hide yourself from us, do you? You're among friends here. You don't need all these layers." Ethan laughed nervously, trying to ease the tension in the air. "Well, I'm not hiding anything, it's just a habit, I promise." Saren stepped closer to him, her gaze intense but playful. "We Velvari do not need clothes. We are free to be who we are. Maybe you should try that. Remove your clothes and show us who you really are." The words hit Ethan like a wave. He stared at her, unsure if she was joking or being serious. The other Velvari women watched him closely, their eyes full of curiosity. He could feel the heat rising in his cheeks. I don't think that's necessary," Ethan said, his voice shaky. We humans have our own ways of doing things, and I'm not really comfortable with being, without clothes in front of so many people." Saren chuckled softly, a low sound that seemed both teasing and understanding. "Of course, human. It's not easy to change your customs, but perhaps you'll learn that true freedom comes from shedding the things that hold you back. Clothes are just one of those things." Ethan was caught off guard by her boldness. He wasn't sure if she was challenging him or simply being playful, but the way she looked at him made him uncomfortable. She was so confident in her own skin, in a way that he could never imagine. The evening continued with more discussions, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Saren's words had planted a seed in his mind. The rest of the Velvari seemed fascinated by his clothing, constantly asking him questions about why humans insisted on wearing so much. Each time, Saren would smile, gently teasing him, her interest in his clothing growing by the minute. As the night went on, Ethan felt more and more out of place. He wasn't used to being the center of attention like this. He tried to engage in conversation, but all anyone seemed to care about was his clothes. Every time someone spoke to him, it was with the same question: "Why do you wear those clothes?" At the end of the evening, Queen Thara called for everyone to gather. The court members began to depart, but Saren lingered behind, giving Ethan a final, mischievous glance. "I look forward to seeing if you can free yourself from those clothes, human," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Maybe tomorrow you will find the courage to be as free as we are." Ethan swallowed hard as she walked away, her words echoing in his mind. He was beginning to understand that the Velvari were not just curious about him. They were fascinated by the idea that humans would cover themselves in such a way. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt self-conscious about something as simple as a shirt and trousers. It was as if the clothes he wore were a symbol of his differences, and the Velvari saw them as barriers to true connection. As he retreated to his quarters, Ethan sat down on the bed, his mind racing. He had come to this planet with the goal of fostering peace and understanding, but now, it seemed, he would need to face something far more personal, something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. Tomorrow, Saren had said. Tomorrow, perhaps, he would have to confront not just the Velvari's strange customs, but his own beliefs about clothing, modesty, and what it meant to truly be free. The next day, Ethan woke up early, his mind still tangled with the events of the previous night. The palace had been quiet when he'd left for his quarters, but now the sounds of the Velvari court could be heard from down the hall. The thought of facing Saren again, and her challenge to his clothing, made him uneasy. He had spent much of the night trying to convince himself that he was just being too sensitive. After all, Saren was just being playful. It was nothing serious, but part of him couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to push him into something he wasn't ready for. Ethan stood in front of the mirror in his quarters, looking at his reflection. His clothes were the same as they had been when he arrived: a simple shirt, trousers, and sturdy boots. It wasn't anything special, but they were comfortable and familiar. He had been wearing the same kind of outfit for years. He couldn't imagine standing in front of a crowd like Saren had suggested without them. It was simply too much. But there was something about Saren's words that kept echoing in his mind. True freedom comes from shedding the things that hold you back. She wasn't just talking about clothes, he realized. She was talking about breaking free from the barriers humans placed on themselves, the walls they built between themselves and others. He had never thought of it that way. On Earth, clothes were more than just fabric. They were a symbol of personal identity and culture. As he stood there, lost in thought, a soft knock came at his door. Ethan quickly turned, startled. "Come in," he called, his voice a bit shakier than he intended. The door opened, and there stood Saren, her presence as striking as ever. She wore no clothes, of course, her form confidently displayed for the world to see. The soft glow of the palace lights made her skin shimmer in the most mesmerizing way. She seemed completely at ease, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Good morning, Ethan," Saren said, her voice light and teasing. "I hope you slept well." She stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation, her violet eyes gleaming with mischief. "Did you think about our conversation last night?" Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He hadn't expected Saren to show up so soon. I did," he replied slowly, "but I still don't understand why you care so much about my clothes." Saren smiled, walking around him like she was inspecting an artifact. "I'm not the only one who wonders," she said, her voice light but full of curiosity. "The Velvari are all fascinated by human clothing. It's strange to us. We live free, unburdened by fabric, by tradition. We believe that what you wear is a mask, a hiding place. It's a way of keeping people at arm's length. But why do you humans do it? Why hide behind something so simple as a shirt?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He had heard similar questions from other Velvari members, but Saren's directness was different. It wasn't just curiosity, it felt like a challenge. She wanted him to question his own beliefs, to see his clothes as something less important than he had always thought. "I don't think it's about hiding," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Clothing is about more than just appearance. It's about protection, tradition, and respect. It's about identity. Each piece of clothing carries a part of who I am." Saren tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "I see," she said softly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "But perhaps you're trapped by your own traditions. Do you believe that you cannot be yourself unless you wear those clothes?" Ethan didn't know how to answer. He had never questioned his reasons for wearing clothes. It was just something everyone did. But now, in the face of Saren's relentless questions, he wasn't so sure anymore. Saren gave him a gentle smile. "Don't worry, Ethan. You don't have to give up your clothing today. I just want you to think about it. We Velvari live without the barriers you wear. But you, perhaps, could learn to be free too. Let go of the things that hold you back." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling a mix of confusion and curiosity. He knew that Saren wasn't trying to be disrespectful. She wasn't attacking him or his culture. She was simply asking him to see things from a different perspective. But it was hard. It was difficult to imagine living without the things that had always defined him. Later that day, Ethan joined the Velvari court for another meeting, though his mind was far from focused on the diplomatic talks. Every few minutes, his gaze would drift to Saren, who sat across the room, her posture relaxed and open. The others in the court seemed equally at ease, as if their lack of clothing was the most natural thing in the world. But Ethan couldn't help but feel out of place. The Velvari women were beautiful, confident, and unashamed. They spoke freely, laughed, and moved through the room as if they were in complete harmony with their surroundings. To them, clothing was simply unnecessary. But for Ethan, it felt like something essential, something that couldn't just be tossed away without thought. As the meeting continued, Saren caught his eye and gave him a knowing smile. She didn't speak, but the challenge in her gaze was clear. It was as if she was daring him to take off the one thing that separated him from her, from the Velvari, from this world. But how could he? Ethan felt a deep discomfort at the thought. His clothes were his shield, his safety. Without them, he would be exposed, vulnerable in a way he wasn't ready to accept. After the meeting, Ethan tried to slip away, but Saren followed him, her footsteps light but determined. She caught up with him in a quiet hallway, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You look troubled," she said. "Did you think more about my question? Why don't you try something different, just once?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Saren, it's just hard. You live without clothes and that's fine for you, but for me, it's not so easy. I don't know if I can just let go of everything I've been taught." Saren's expression softened, and for a moment she looked almost sympathetic. "I understand," she said. "It's not easy to change, but perhaps in time you will see that it's not the clothes that make you who you are. It's you." Ethan looked at her, his mind swirling. The Velvari were so different from humans, and yet they were. They both had struggles, desires, and fears. They both wanted to connect. Maybe Saren was right. Maybe the clothes weren't the real issue. Maybe it was something deeper, something he had to let go of in order to truly understand this world and her. But for now, Ethan couldn't bring himself to take that step. The fear of being exposed physically and emotionally was too great. He wasn't ready. Saren smiled again, her expression warm but knowing. "I'll give you time, Ethan. But remember, true freedom comes from within. You must find it in yourself first." As she walked away, Ethan stood there in the quiet hallway, alone with his thoughts. The weight of her words pressed down on him. He wasn't sure if he was ready to change, but one thing was clear. Saren had planted a seed in his mind. And it was growing, slowly but surely. Ethan had been thinking about Saren's words all night. What did she mean by true freedom? What would it be like to live without the things that held him back, like his clothes, his habits, his fears? He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, the quiet hum of the palace surrounding him. He had always felt secure in his own world in his own ways. But now, on this strange alien planet, his beliefs were being questioned. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure of the answers. The next morning, the Velvari court gathered again. Queen Thara called for a meeting, and as usual, Ethan found himself in the grand hall, surrounded by the court members. Saren was already there, sitting elegantly on one of the velvet cushions, her calm, confident expression a stark contrast to Ethan's growing discomfort. He couldn't stop thinking about the challenge she had laid out for him the day before. Should he give in? Was she right? Was he hiding behind his clothes, unwilling to open up fully to this new world? "Good morning, Ambassador Ethan," Queen Thara greeted him, her regal voice carrying through the room. Her presence commanded respect, yet there was an underlying warmth in her tone that made Ethan feel at ease, even in the face of his uncertainty. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Ethan replied, bowing slightly. He tried to mask his nerves with a smile, but the tension in his chest remained. Every time his eyes met Saren's, he felt as though she were silently watching, waiting for him to make a decision. The meeting began, and Ethan tried his best to focus on the discussions at hand. They were discussing trade agreements and the potential benefits of human and Velvari collaboration, but Ethan's mind kept drifting back to the conversation with Saren. The Velvari had no need for clothes, no need for barriers. They lived their lives without the constraints of tradition, and yet they were happy, free, or so it seemed. Was there something to their way of life that Ethan was missing? As the meeting continued, Queen Thara addressed the room, her voice commanding yet gentle. "Today, we will be engaging in an important test of trust and unity between our species. It will require openness, understanding, and the shedding of barriers. Ambassador Ethan, we welcome you to participate. You will join Saren in a task that will demonstrate how well humans can adapt to the Velvari way of life." Ethan looked up, confused. "What task?" he asked, his voice betraying his nerves. Queen Thara smiled knowingly. "It will not be easy, but it is necessary. We have a tradition here among the Velvari, a tradition that is central to our philosophy of unity. You will work with Saren to complete the task, and by doing so, you will experience the freedom we value so highly." Ethan glanced at Saren, who gave him a small, encouraging smile. Her eyes seemed to sparkle with excitement, as if she had been expecting this moment. She wasn't just testing him, she was inviting him into her world. "What exactly do I need to do?" Ethan asked again, trying to hide his growing unease. "It's simple," Saren replied, her voice calm but with an edge of excitement. "You will need to leave behind your clothing for the duration of the task. Only then will you be able to fully experience the freedom we speak of." Ethan felt his heart race. The thought of being without his clothes in front of the court in front of Saren was terrifying. He had never been so exposed, so vulnerable. His clothes weren't just fabric, they were his protection, his safety. Without them, he felt like he would be nothing. But, "I don't know if I can do that," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "I'm not ready. This is too much." Saren's eyes softened with understanding. "I know it's difficult, Ethan, but that's the point. True freedom doesn't come without discomfort. You have to face your fear. Only then can you truly let go." The room fell silent as Ethan wrestled with his thoughts. He could feel the eyes of the Velvari on him, their gazes full of curiosity and expectation. Queen Thara's calm, yet powerful presence loomed over him, urging him to take the leap. "What will the task involve?" Ethan asked quietly, trying to gather his courage. Saren smiled. "We will go into the gardens, into nature. It's a place where the Velvari are free to express themselves without the constraints of society. You will join me, but only if you are willing to leave your clothes behind. The task is not just about our bodies, it's about our minds, our trust, and our willingness to shed the things that hold us back." Ethan took a deep breath, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had spent his entire life hiding behind layers of fabric, behind rules, behind expectations. Could he really do this? Could he step out of his comfort zone, face his fear, and trust that Saren was right? That maybe, just maybe, there was something to the Velvari way of life that he could learn from. The decision weighed heavily on him. The Velvari were all looking at him now, waiting for his answer. It wasn't just about the clothes anymore. It was about him as a person, as a representative of humanity. Could he embrace this moment of change and move forward with the Velvari, or would he remain trapped in his own fears? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan nodded slowly. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do it." Saren's face lit up with a smile. "You won't regret it," she said softly. "This is the first step towards true freedom." The court members stood, some exchanging excited whispers. Queen Thara gave a small nod of approval before turning toward the exit. "You have made the right choice, Ambassador Ethan," she said. "Come, the gardens await." Ethan felt a mixture of dread and anticipation as he followed Saren through the palace halls. His heart pounded in his chest and his thoughts raced. What was he about to do? Would he truly be able to let go of everything he had known? Or would this test be too much for him? When they reached the gardens, Ethan couldn't help but pause. The area was vast, filled with lush, green plants and strange, glowing flowers. The air was fresh and filled with the scent of exotic plants. It was beautiful, but Ethan's nerves were still on edge. Saren stood beside him, waiting patiently for him to take the next step. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Ethan looked around, his eyes searching for the right words. "I don't know if I am," he admitted. "But I'll try," Saren smiled. "That's all I ask. Take it one step at a time. Let go of the fear. You'll see, there's nothing to be afraid of." Ethan hesitated for a moment longer, then slowly began to unbutton his shirt. He felt a pang of vulnerability, but at the same time, a strange sense of freedom washed over him. One piece of clothing at a time, he shed his protection. When it was done, he stood there, exposed to the open air. He could feel the cool breeze against his skin, the warmth of the sun, and the soft ground beneath his bare feet. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt something he couldn't quite explain. He was no longer hidden behind the layers of his clothes. He was just Ethan, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Ethan stood in the Velvari garden, his heart pounding in his chest. The cool breeze brushed against his skin, and the scent of flowers filled the air. For the first time since he had arrived on this alien world, he felt truly exposed. He had never been without clothes in front of anyone before, not in public, not in a room full of strangers. But now, surrounded by the lush beauty of the garden with Saren by his side, he felt something different, something that made him both vulnerable and strangely free. Saren stood across from him, her expression calm and reassuring. She had been right. This wasn't about the clothes. It wasn't even about his body. It was about shedding the fears, the walls, the things that kept him from truly connecting with others. And as much as it had scared him to take off his clothes, he had realized that it wasn't just a physical act. It was a symbol of something much deeper. "You're doing well, Ethan," Saren said, her voice soft but full of encouragement. "It's not easy to let go of what we've been taught, but you're here. You're with us now." Ethan nodded, though he still felt a little uneasy. It wasn't just about being without clothes, it was about being fully present, fully open. He had always relied on the comfort of his earthly traditions. Clothes had been a shield, a barrier between him and the world. But now, standing in front of Saren and the wide-open sky, he had no such shield. There was only the truth of who he was, vulnerable, human, and uncertain. Saren smiled as she stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. "In the Velvari culture, we believe that to truly connect with others, we must be open. In every way, we shed the things that keep us apart. Clothes are one thing, but there are other walls we build inside ourselves too. Barriers like fear, pride, and shame. If you want to understand us, you need to see beyond those walls." Ethan took a deep breath. She was right. He had spent his life hiding behind layers of tradition, believing that the way things had always been was the only way. But now, standing here on an alien world, he had begun to question everything. Could he really leave behind all the old ways and embrace something new? "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Ethan began, his voice a little shaky. "About freedom and letting go. I've always thought that the way I was raised, the traditions I follow, were what defined me. But now, I don't know, maybe those things are holding me back. Maybe I've been too afraid to be fully myself." Saren's eyes softened and she took a step closer to him. "It's not easy to let go of what you've always known, but that's why it's called a test. The truth is, Ethan, we all have our fears, even we Velvari. The difference is that we don't let them control us. We embrace them, face them head-on, and let them go. That's how we find true freedom." Ethan looked around at the garden once more, the vibrant colors of the flowers and the soft hum of life around him. The Velvari lived in harmony with nature, free from the burdens of tradition that so often weighed down humanity. Could he ever truly be as free as they were? "I'm still not sure if I can be as open as you are," Ethan admitted. "I don't think I'm ready to completely shed everything I've known, but I want to try. I want to understand. I want to see what it feels like to be free." Saren smiled again, her expression gentle and understanding. "That's all I ask, Ethan. We don't expect you to change overnight, but you've taken the first step. That's the hardest part." The two of them stood there for a moment, in the quiet of the garden, each processing the moment in their own way. For Ethan, it felt like a turning point, like he had stepped into a new chapter of his life, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. And while he was still uncertain about what lay ahead, he felt a new sense of hope. Maybe he could change. Maybe he could find a way to be more like the Velvari, free from fear, free from shame, free from the walls that kept him isolated. As the day wore on, Saren guided him through the gardens, showing him the many plants and creatures that thrived in this beautiful alien world. The air was thick with the scent of flowers, and the sounds of distant music echoed through the trees. Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the peace and beauty that surrounded him. It was a stark contrast to the noisy, chaotic world he had left behind on Earth. They sat by a tranquil pond, watching as the water shimmered in the soft light of the setting sun. The colors of the sky changed from a bright blue to warm shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful, but it was more than just the beauty of the landscape that caught Ethan's attention. It was the feeling of being present, of being completely aware of the moment. Saren turned to him, her gaze thoughtful. "How are you feeling now, Ethan? Is it different?" "The world, I mean." Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "It's strange, actually. I feel like I'm seeing everything for the first time. Like I've been looking at the world through a foggy window and now it's clear. I don't know if I'm fully there yet, but..." It's a start, Saren nodded. It's a process, but you're on the right path. Ethan smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't that he had found all the answers. It wasn't even that he had fully embraced the Velvari way of life, but he had taken the first step. And that was enough for now. As they sat together by the pond, Ethan began to realize something important. It wasn't the absence of clothes that made the Velvari different. It wasn't just their openness, their confidence, or their way of life. It was their ability to shed the things that held them back, both external and internal. The Velvari weren't afraid to face their fears, their doubts, or their vulnerabilities, and in doing so, they were free. For the first time in his life, Ethan understood what Saren had been trying to tell him. Freedom wasn't about the things you wore or the things you held on to. It was about being true to yourself, accepting your flaws, and embracing the unknown. It was about letting go of the barriers that kept you from truly connecting with others. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the garden, Ethan knew that his journey had only just begun. There was still much to learn, much to explore, but he had made a choice. He had chosen to let go of his fear, his shame, and his doubts. And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of an alien world, he felt more alive than he ever had before.